direction, guidance, help, support, whatever it might be. And I make that my intent when I go on stage is not to try and make myself look clever as a speaker. It's not to make me be the funniest guy in the room. My intent is to help the people in the room today and come from that position of supporting and encouraging.
Welcome to the Get Invested podcast, where we share conversations I've enjoyed with experts from all walks of life to uncover their secret know-how on where they invest their time, their skills and their money, and the benefits this has created. Get Invested helps you to live more, work less, and leave a legacy by investing now. Listen to the show to discover top tips on how to get started, to make the most of your investment journey, and ultimately to be living the dream. More episodes can be found on iTunes or at khgroup.com.au/Get Invested. Thanks for listening, and let's get invested. Welcome to Get Invested, freedom fighters. So what's your excuse? A lot of us feel that we've had it tough, and there's always someone else or something else that's prevented us from achieving our dreams. Well, after listening to today's guest, you'll no longer have any excuses, and you'll be motivated to start making changes now. If you thought you had it tough, then try this on for size. Andrew Griffiths was abandoned by his parents when he was just 6 months old. He doesn't know when or where he was born, and he had no birth certificate. He was left on the doorstep of an elderly woman. She took him in and his sister and then systematically abused him mentally and physically for years, telling him how much she hated him and wished him dead. He wasn't even allowed to sleep inside, so he slept on a soggy old mattress on the veranda come rain, hail or shine. He didn't even get to brush his teeth until he was 8 years old. Predictably, he turned to crime, alcohol and drugs. Fast forward to today, and Andrew's an international best-selling author of over 20 books published in over 65 countries. He's a global speaker who has addressed most of the Fortune 500 companies, including working with Richard Branson, and is an inspirational mentor. He's also a small business specialist. So if you want to learn how he's made this miraculous change and still remain a very humble and humorous character, you're really going to love this episode. I can genuinely say that I count AG as one of the few people who has changed my life. And if it wasn't for him, my book, The Freedom Formula, would never have happened. So please enjoy the warmth, wit and inspiring energy of my good friend, Andrew Griffiths. Welcome back to Get Invested. It's Bushy Martin. I've got the real pleasure today to spend some time with the infamous Andrew Griffiths. Andrew, you're one of the very few people that I can honestly say has been responsible for changing my life and for the better, I might add. And I'm a little bit nervous, mate. I'm a little bit in awe of you. There's a bit of a bromance that I've got for you secretly that I've had ever since I had the pleasure of first meeting you a while back. So welcome aboard and really looking forward to having a chat, mate.
Thank you, Bushy. I'm glad that we've got off to a weird start. I like that. It's the best way for a podcast episode to start. But, mate, really very, 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 very kind of you to say that stuff. And don't worry, the bromance is mutual. Mate, for those of you who are listening, Bushy and I have been working together in a few ways over the last 12 months, and knowing you and your lovely other half, Sonia, you two are just two of the beautiful people on the planet. So it's a mutual admiration club. So for everyone listening now, the next 60 minutes or so, you might need to get a bucket at some stage.
Awesome, mate. No, I appreciate those kind words, mate. But look. You do so much and have done so much, mate, that I don't even want to touch it. Can I, for those of you who haven't been lucky enough to spend time with Andrew Griffiths, can you tell us a bit about who you are and what you do, mate?
Yeah, sure, mate. Well, these days, I guess I'm probably most known around the traps as an author. So I've written 13 books that I admit to that have been mainly around small business, non-fiction type stuff, personal development, that kind of thing. I wrote a book called The Me Myth, which is about our obsession with ourselves, and a whole pile of things. And I've been writing now for probably about 20 years. So, in fact, next year is my 20th anniversary. My books are sold. I know it's hard to believe, right? My books are sold in 65 countries around the world, which still kind of blows me away. And on top of writing, I'm a speaker, so I've been, speaking likewise around the world. I literally just got back from London and caught up with you, Bushy, just briefly on my return. And in the last 12 months, I've presented in places like Ireland, Iran, in the Middle East, you name it. Bali, China, all over the place in different areas. And I talk about entrepreneurialism, what's happening in the world of entrepreneurialism, and as much as, getting things done, personal development, growth, all those kind of things. So predominantly they're the two main areas that I work in, but I also teach people to write books, which is how you and I cross paths with you writing your fabulous first book, The Freedom Formula.
Thanks, man.
And I also, teach people how to be professional speakers. And I run those programs again around the world. And over the years, I've in the work I do, I've worked for tons of different corporations. Like in the UK, for example, I was working for the European Union to run workshops for people that wanted to learn how to sell their products internationally. Okay. All types of things, right through to in Australia, the Telstras of the world and the banks of the world. Probably about 500 corporations, I guess, I've worked for in the last 20 years, mate.
Wow. Well, I'll let you in a little secret, mate. I know I haven't mentioned this to you before, but I got to see you years ago at a St. George Bank SA exercise where you were one of the guest speakers, and in a very nice way you gave the finance broking profession the bollocksing around the ears by basically saying, mate, just pick up your phone and answer your calls and you might find that businesses goes a lot better for you. And I walked away from it thinking, that was awesome. That was to have someone that was pretty much straight shooting on, because everyone starts to gaze at the navel and look at every other excuse as to why, they'll blame social media and every other damn thing that they can point the finger at. But sometimes it's pretty simple, mate, and you just hit it right between the eyes.
It was, and I do remember that actual present. Was that in Adelaide?
Yes, mate, it was.
How funny is that? Because I did a tour around Australia for St. George, and that was Bank SA, right? In Adelaide was their affiliation. That's it. And I remember talking about that because again. I did very intentionally kind of give the industry a little bit of a swift kick because I did my own research, and isn't this an interesting thing? Because I never trust it. Whenever I'm given a briefing as a speaker, I never trust what they brief me on. So I went and did my own research, and I said, "Tell me what your biggest challenges with a mortgage broker or financial planner or whatever it is." And most people said the same thing. They never return the phone call, and I have to constantly kind of chase them. And I used that in that particular presentation. And the argument that often came back to me was, well, I've got nothing to tell them, the customer. I've got nothing to tell them. And my response was, you ring them to tell them that you've got nothing to tell them.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's as simple as that. But you show that you don't worry about it. I got this, and you can rely on me. And it was, I always laugh a bit at the resistance to stuff like that. But anyway, really nice that you remembered it, mate. Thank you.
But it's actually, it's something that we've done all the time. We've got a simple rule in our business that, if we're actively looking after someone, they should hear from us at least 3 times a week, and always on a Friday, because no news is generally perceived as bad news, and you don't want people stressing over the weekend. So, but there are so many that get caught up in process and forget about the people element, mate, and then they wonder why they're struggling in the wilderness. But so that was probably awesome, mate. But mate, why do you do what you do, AG?
Firstly, because I'm unemployable is probably the most, once you come to terms with that, Bushy, life opens all these wonderful kind of opportunities for you. There's no point in looking for a job because no one will employ me. I'm too outspoken and too opinionated, and getting worse as I get older. I am, I think, really lucky. I've got the business that I have, that is perfect for me. It suits me, and I love every part of it. And it just took me 30 years to build it, Just one of those. I mean, for me, I'm driven. I love teaching people stuff. I really am a teacher more than anything else. I love freedom. I love traveling. I was addicted to travel. I went to to Papua New Guinea when I was 18 and worked in a dive shop up there for 3 months, ran a dive shop. I'm a commercial diver by trade.
Whereabouts, mate? I'm going to jump in because I worked in New Guinea as well for a stretch. Were you in Moresby itself or somewhere else?
I was in Rabaul.
Oh, beautiful.
And it was just this tropical paradise. Oh. I was an 18-year-old kid running a friend's dive shop for 3 months, and it was just unbelievably wonderful experience. And I had a friend of mine whose wife, she was a local Papua New Guinean, and so she was living in Australia. I knew her from Australia, and so her parents' village was just outside of Rabaul. So I kind of went and hung out at the village, spent a few nights up there with her family, and it was literally for people don't realise how primitive parts of Papua New Guinea were and still are. Yeah. The little pigs running around in the yard, no communication, no nothing, just dirt floors, and it was amazing. But what were you doing up there, Bushy?
Mate, I was an architect way back, and I call my New Guinea expose my Indiana Jones years, mate.
It's a wild joint.
Oh, mate, they reckon there's only 3 types of people that go to New Guinea, and they're missionaries,
mercenaries,
and mercenaries, mate. And I'm still trying to work out which category I fit into, but I spent some time in a little coastal spot called Tufi, which is up on the sort of northeastern coast down from Lae, if you know that part of the world, and it was paradise, mate. There was flying fish. You'd literally walk on the water. There's that many fish in the bay where I was living. It was just an awesome. But you're right. 50 or 60 years ago, they were eating each other. So a pretty interesting place, and there's about 360 odd different languages within that very small bit of geography, so it's a very interesting part of the world, mate. But I always say to people, if the world needs an enema, Port Moresby is probably the right place to do it.
Ooh, I tell you, it's the most dangerous city in the world by a head per capita, which is pretty interesting when you think of places, during the, various Middle Eastern wars and things like that. So, But anyway, on a brighter note, it is an amazing place. But for me, what it did, travel has been an important part of my life. I love to travel, and I've traveled ever since then. So when you roll all of that stuff together, for me, I like to teach people stuff. I like freedom. I don't like to be tied down to the one spot. I like to be able to travel. I like to be able to work with, people that have got, really great outlook on life. And that's kind of what I do now. That's exactly what my business is. I can kind of choose who I want to work for. I'm always flying somewhere. I'm always on a plane, either heading off overseas or around Australia. I'm inspiring, hopefully, and teaching, groups of people about how to do things perhaps differently, challenge their conventional thinking. And I have a business that I absolutely love and adore, and hopefully I'm getting a little bit better at doing it every day,
Well, mate, I'm in awe of what you managed to do and the influence that you've had on myself and a lot of people that have had the pleasure of knowing through the Key Person of Influence program, where I was lucky enough to spend some time with you. But I was even, I guess, more in awe when I started doing the Google stalk and reading some of your books and whatnot to know of your very challenging beginnings, mate. And I guess I'm pretty keen in the context of thinking through where you've invested your time, energy and money over your journey to get a sense of, what was done with intent and what just sort of happened to you. I'm pretty keen to go right back, if I can, for a couple of minutes, mate, and just look at your very challenging beginnings, Andrew. And I'm sort of keen to get inside your head and work out how you managed to survive that time, mate. Because for those who don't know, from what I understand, you don't really know where you're born or when. You didn't have a birth certificate when you started, and you were left on Mrs. Doubtfire's doorstep up the road when you're about 6 months old, mate. So, pretty challenging from there, from what I understand.
Yeah, well, for me, it's one of those unusual kind of lives. But when you're inside that life, it actually isn't unusual because you don't know anything else. So my parents, left myself and my sister. She was 18 months old and I was 6 months old, and they disappeared and, left us with an old lady that used to live up the road. And to the comment that you make, Bushy, about Mrs. Doubtfire, I mean, I say to all intensive purposes, she looked like Mrs. Doubtfire, this lovely kind of grandmotherly lady, and this was in Melbourne. Yeah. So it was a bizarre kind of upbringing. I mean, not having a birth certificate makes things very complicated for you in life, and how can I even not have a birth certificate? But, a lot of people in Australia don't have birth certificates, believe it or not.
Yeah, right.
Certainly in Indigenous communities, it's a lot more common than we would like to know.
Yeah.
But so we ended up with this old lady. I don't really know why. I mean, I've met my mother since then, but sorry, I haven't met my mother. I met my father, and I met him when I was 22, and I was very grateful that I didn't live with him because he was just basically an alcoholic, and I didn't really need an alcoholic in my life at the age of 22, so we didn't really connect. And I've never met my mother, but I've met two of her brothers who have never heard from her since that time. So she was a young lady. She had two kids out of wedlock to an Italian boy. She was an English girl. In Melbourne somewhere. It was her. She got disowned by her family. And I think my sister and I, Wendy, were kind of collateral damage in that kind of relationship. But we ended up with this old lady, and she took us over to Perth for some reason. I still have no idea why we went to Perth. But she was an incredible woman. She was born in 1896.
Wow.
Hard to imagine that, isn't it? So, someone being that old back then. And she was tough as she was 70 years old when she took us in, and she could have easily just called the cops or done something, and but she took us in.
Unbelievable. And,
which in itself is wild, but she was also, there were good things and bad things. I mean, she did that, but she was also, pretty nutty, and she had all kinds of mental issues and challenges. She was incredibly violent. Wendy and I lived a lifetime that was, this is, late 60s, early 70s in Perth, where, it was just this surreal existence. A lot of, an old lady and two young kids in North Perth, a pretty rough part of Perth as well. Right. There's all kinds of sexual predators around. There's, again, people, I don't know, we're almost accepting of violence in the households, and so we had a really, really challenging life. It's just I don't want anyone jumping out the windows listening to the podcast. But it was tough, but you learn to adapt. Kids are incredibly resilient. So I didn't sleep inside a house until I was 10. I slept outside on a mattress, because I wasn't allowed to sleep in the house.
Our dogs get better treatment than that, mate.
Well, your dogs definitely do. I know, but I kind of took to wandering the streets of Perth from, 5 years of age, my earliest age. And again, it was all surreal, and there's all kind of weird things that happen as a result of it. But in the same vein though, Bushy, I also became who I am because of her. I lived with her till I was 10. The welfare finally took me off of her. Okay. She fractured my skull with a rake. She'd beaten me up, and they got involved, in the police and rah, and really all my formative years were with her. And I look at it and I kind of go, well, I kind of turned out pretty okay. Yeah. As much as she was, there was a dark side to her, there was also a good side. She taught me about manners. She taught me how to treat women. She taught me how to how to be self-sufficient. She taught me a lot of really good stuff. It's just that perhaps her teaching techniques needed, had a little bit to be desired.
She was probably the best Hitler School of Parenting, did she, mate?
Oh, my God, yeah.
I just want to share something with the crew that might be listening to this, mate, out of the me myth. And this really struck home to me because I had no concept of this. And where you're talking about Winifred and you say that she would scream at Wendy or me, inches from our faces, spittle flying, and she told us how she hated us, how filthy and disgusting we were, and how she wanted us dead. She would drag us around the house by the hair. She would beat us with lumps of wood. I lost track of the number of times I was woken in the middle of the night as she attacked me with a shovel or a walking stick, screaming at the top of her lungs. Mate, how do you survive that, mate? And I look at you now and the experience I've had with you. You've got to be the most giving, generous, warm, humorous bloke I've come across. And yet you went through that war zone in your very formative years. What belief or what were you thinking in your head that enabled you to survive and prosper from that, mate? I'm in awe of that, buddy. So I've got to tell you.
Well, thank you, mate. Look, I think there's two things, to be honest. One is I could tell that her anger and all of the stuff that was eating her up was really actually nothing to do with me. You know, she had a really hard life. She'd lost like 2 or 3 husbands. She'd had a breast removed to cancer when she was a young girl. She'd lost most of the family men in her family through different wars. She was in Perth with these 2 children that she was scared. She would have been 75, 76, 77 then. No financial support, no family really. You know, this whole, you know, she was just consumed by fear, you know, and I could understand that. I could rationalize that. I think we underestimate the intelligence of children at times to take a read on the situation. And I, you know, I had another situation where I got abducted by another crazy lady. Common theme in my life is crazy.
There's a bit of a pattern developing here, mate.
I know. Normally I marry them. No, that's terrible. Did I say that? But the reality of it was that this lady one day, we kind of knew her from around the street. She just lost the plot, and she kind of smashed down the door to our house, and she grabbed my sister, dragged her up the road, and I was just a tiny little kid. So I run after her, and I'm starting to punch her on the back, you know, as little kids do, to let go of my sister. Yep. She's turned around, she's punched me in the face and knocked me on my bum, and I've got blood coming down. Then she's dragged me by my ear, basically my arm, up the road around to her house. The next thing, we're in this hostage situation. And I remember looking out the window and seeing police and ambulances, and this lady's literally got a knife to my throat saying she's going to kill me, you know, and she just, and I knew that even then with her, it really wasn't about me. It was just, this lady had all these issues, which I kind of was too young to really understand, but clearly she just, you know, lost the plot and, you know, and was really hurting. And I think that, I could understand that. I didn't really understand it from an adult point of view, but as a kid, I could understand that she was in pain and there was stuff going on, and it really, again, wasn't about me. We found out later she couldn't have children, and she saw Wendy, my sister, and myself every day, you know, going off to school, and with this old lady in that house, and just decided that she wanted to have my sister as a child.
Good grief, mate.
Sorry, mate.
You're right. Go on. Yep.
I was just going to say, you know, so I could see that. And I think throughout life, you know, my childhood, all types of things that happen when you have that predictable life, even when we got taken off her by the welfare and ended up living with, you know, foster parents. You know, my foster mother died of cancer 6 months after. She was a lovely lady, but my foster father lost the plot and started abusing my sister, you know, sexually. And it was just, you know, this ridiculous kind of life, you know, just continued. And I think, again, I did go down that predictable path, Bushy, of, you know, drugs, alcohol, you know, petty crime, breaking into houses, stealing cars. And you can see why it becomes such a predictable path, because you're trying to find your way. You find a group of friends. And I had a couple of groups of friends. Some were good, some not so good, others that were kind of downright, you know, heading to prison. Yeah. And it's just that that was the group that I probably spent too much of my time with at that age. But I was smart enough to know that if I kept going on this path, you know, it was going to end badly. Yeah.
So what was the penny drop, or can you think back to the time that you made the decision, no, this is not for me, I'm going to do something else? I'm just intrigued by it, mate, because most people would go down exactly that path and never return. And I'm just really interested to understand what was it that sort of led you to head in a different direction?
I think I've been really lucky. I've had a few of those situations that have been really almost spiritual kind of moments where, you know, I reach a crossroad and the crossroad is there in front of me and I can turn left or turn right. And I had that really, really very clearly defined moment. I think I must have been about 17. I'd been living just on couches at friends' places kind of things for years by that stage of the game. You know, the group of friends that I was going to go out with that night, you know, I was literally at the end of the driveway waiting to be picked up by these guys. And I just had that moment, where this kind of bolt of lightning kind of hit me and went, you're going to either turn left, go out with these guys and head down that path, or turn right and, get away, forge your own life, get on with your life and be a strong enough man to not succumb to that. And I was fortunate that the choice was really easy. So I turned right. I went back into the house and literally packed a bag and ended up, I left Sydney almost that night, I think, just got out of there because I knew that what was going to happen. And that moment was so clear for me I had to make that decision. And I think we all have those, in our lives, but sometimes making that right decision is not so easy. And I'm really grateful to that because I tell you what, I've been my own man ever since.
I bet.
Ever since that day when I was 17, and I'm 52 now, I've always been my own man in terms of, peer group pressure. All it did was teach me how to smoke, drink and take drugs and steal cars. And none of those are positive, And I learned from it. But I also believe very, very much that a lot of this is all about choosing. I could easily choose to be a victim. I get asked all the time, how come you don't kind of hurt puppies? Like after a childhood like that, how come you're not like this? And I go, because I made a decision not to. And I definitely, there's times in my life, believe me, it would have been very easy to slide down that path, but I made a very conscious decision not to. And to not play victim. And I think too many people play victim. And I think too many people who've got the least reason to play victim do play victim.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then you meet someone who's 90, who's had all their family killed in Auschwitz and all the rest of it, and they turn around and go, and they're the most beautiful person you've ever met. And you kind of go, if anyone's got the right to be pissed off with the world, you have. And yet you're not. And you ask them why, and they say, because I chose not to be. And it might sound like a simple solution, but a lot of people are so self-absorbed with stuff that really just doesn't matter. You kind of go, let it go and get onwards and focus forward. And every once in a while, sometimes every 10 years or so, sometimes I need to remind myself of that, Bushy. Yeah. I might be going through a bit of a tough time, but I believe that, it's an old saying, but life gives you two choices. You can either get bitter about what happens or you can get better as a person. And it's obviously, without sounding like a Hallmark card, the second option is a whole lot better.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I guess the trap for a lot of people is the fear of the unknown. And while what they do know is ugly by most definitions, it's what they know. And having the courage to say, right, I've got to get out of here, which you obviously did, packing your bags and getting right out of that situation so that there was no opportunity for all the existing relationships to influence you otherwise. That's a pretty courageous thing to do at 17, mate. There's not too many that would have the balls to get up and make that happen. And it just really interests me that you've clearly got enough, at a very young age, the empathy to understand that because a lot of kids will blame themselves for everything that's going on. If their parents split up, it's their fault. If it's a natural thing. At that age, yet you seem to have this innate ability to look outside of that and step outside of the situation and say, well, it's not actually me. This person's actually got some issues. And because anyone else, mate, I had a fantastic upbringing and
right.
But I had massive self-esteem issues. I had. I didn't believe I was good enough, which translated into workaholism because I had to prove to myself and everyone that I was okay. And if everyone else said I was okay, I must be okay. And I just about killed myself doing that, burnt myself out early and destroyed a marriage and everything else as a result of that need to try and get other people to say, well, you're actually okay, Bushy.
And I've done the same too, mate. Don't think for 1 second. I came out of that, with the Buddha under a tree with all the answers. It's been certainly a lifelong, program for me to I get up every day and try and do the whole thing. How am I better as a man today than I was yesterday? And learn. And sometimes it's 2 steps forward and 1 step back. On that side of it, and I can relate to that. For me, I think I became a workaholic. I bought my first business when I was 17, going on 18 as well, and I think that really saved me because I had responsibility. I had to. I found something, and I found that being an entrepreneur is something that I really, really loved. And I don't know where the hell that came from because I certainly didn't have any entrepreneurial role models in my life. But I bought this clapped-out old dive shop in Sydney that was really just a barely functioning kind of business. and it became my little kingdom. That I ran and learnt and broke more and fixed and did all kinds of things. And I think it kind of gave me a bit of purpose. But I've always, thrown myself into my work as my mechanism to deal with tough times. And I don't know that it's necessarily the right answer when I look back, either. Okay. But it's better than some of the alternatives.
Well, yeah, and then workaholism is better than alcoholism and drugs and every other thing in terms of its outcome. There's no doubt about that. But I guess it's still an addiction of a sort, and it's certainly one that I continue to struggle with, mate, because I actually love what I do and spend an enormous amount of time doing it. And people often say, you'd get this more than I do, that how do you do it and why do you do it? And it's like, well, I wouldn't have it any other way. I just love it. What about you, mate? Did it feel the same way? Or?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't really look at even Monday to Friday or Monday to... I just look at every day is a day, and I'll do some work every day. But hopefully I'm just getting a bit smarter as I get a bit older. I certainly I travel a bit more comfortably these days. I stay in probably better hotels. I take a lot more time out than I probably ever had. There's a time I'd be doing calls in Sydney and I'd try and fit in like 10 calls a day, 10 appointments. Now I might do 3 or 4. You know what I mean? When I'm got to go and see people, I've just probably slowed it down a little bit now, and I'll have a morning off in Sydney and go over to Manly on the ferry and do a bit of that stuff. So I hopefully a little bit smarter in that space now than I've ever been. I'm definitely smarter in that space. But I still work a lot because, again, the same thing. I love what I do, and I work with incredible people, and I have the total flexibility. I can work or not work today if I want to, generally, depending on what my schedule is. And, you got to self-manage yourself, and it's a lot easier to self-manage yourself when you're kind of doing stuff that you like, So, again, I know that sometimes for people when they hear that, they don't quite understand it. But I say for those who found the thing that they love to do, that it really is something kind of special when you found that, and you kind of go, you know what, it really isn't a chore to get up at 5 o'clock and work till 10 o'clock at night. You don't at the end of it go, oh my God, I'm only getting paid $2 an hour to do that. I'd be better off working at McDonald's, for all the work. But you do it because you have this innate passion about it. It's never about the dollars and the cents in that space so much, because your primary thing is, kind of, I don't know, meeting different needs, satisfaction, meeting your need to help others, all that kind of stuff kind of comes into play.
Yeah. I mean, having listened to some of the stuff you've done with others, and you described what your typical month looks like. Your typical week looks like most people's months, and I reckon you're busier than a one-armed Bangkok bus driver, mate. How you manage to fit it all in just escapes me. I feel tired just listening to what your schedule is like, mate.
I think I've just got really good at teaching. I think I've got really good at looking busy. I think that's probably that's what I've mastered the most. Is I've managed to make it. Oh my God, this guy looks so busy. Must be really busy. I definitely don't work anywhere near as hard as I used to. Believe me, Bushy.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well,
I don't know whether that's good or bad.
Yeah. Well, with the sort of the broad, while there's some commonality in terms of you focus on communication and stories and with your speaking, your writing, and the work you do with small business, that's a pretty full workload, mate. How do you maintain the energy, and what are the sort of the rituals that or habits that you've instilled that allow you to survive and continue to do that, mate?
I think it's an interesting thing because I always get asked, I do have a lot of energy, and I think I've always just had a lot of energy. I think that I do the kind of work that energizes me, doesn't kind of, drain me, and I think that really helps as well. But I do have good rituals, I probably don't exercise as much as I should, which is the one thing that I don't do as much of, but I'm just really selective about having a really structured work day, having a really structured workplace. I make sure that I have a really nice place where I'm working from. That to me is my environment is really important from a working point of view. I've got really good at structuring the actual work that I'm doing in the space of a day. So if I'm looking at my day and I'm filled with dread, then, that wouldn't be a day for me. I just don't have days like that. And that doesn't happen by accident. You got to consciously make that stuff happen. So I spend a lot of time in the creative space, developing products and programs and things, because once again, that is what nurtures me. And a day of writing, I feel fantastic after a day of writing, as opposed to a day of doing, end of financial year, bookkeeping, so I think over the years, what I've really learned, Bushy, is to understand myself better and make sure that I align with the things that I'm doing, the tasks that I'm doing, when I'm doing them, etc. And I do, if I get up and said today, you know what, I really feel like a day off, I have the day off. Whether it be a Wednesday, whether it be whatever, as long as I can clear my decks, I'll have a day off because I know I'll work on it on Saturday or Sunday, or I won't. And that's a really big part for me, is I've built that freedom into what I do. Yes. It's like if I'm as I said, if I'm in Sydney or Melbourne, I'll never fly down on a Friday or Monday morning and fly back on a Friday night. For me, that's when all the craziness happens. Yeah. I'll fly down on a Sunday afternoon, catch up with friends, have a nice night and be ready there for work or whatever. So I've kind of put good work practices into place that to me are kind of about self-respect. And then that enables me to get a lot more done because I'm not exhausted all the time from doing the ridiculous, flight home on a Friday night or I'm doing stuff that, I don't like, or I'm staying in a really crappy little hotel, with a really bad bed that, you get up and go, I can't even go and do any work, Not everyone has that luxury, I understand, but I've consciously built this kind of world. This doesn't just happen. This is stuff that I've consciously said. If I'm going to travel all the time, if I start to hate traveling, when you're on the road 3 weeks of every month, believe me, if you start to hate traveling, you're not going to do that for very long. No. I love to travel because I get to choose how I travel, where I travel, not always where I travel, but, I get to choose how I travel, all that kind of jazz. And that, again, just means I arrive in better shape, and it means I'm, more fired up and motivated. So, setting intent is, all of that stuff is so important for me.
Yeah, so would I be right to say that you're pretty much living your dream, mate, at the moment? Is this something that your lifestyle now is the vision that you had way back when, or is it just sort of happened to you?
I definitely living the dream of the type of life that I want to live, and all of the things that are important to me when I tick. Without a doubt, the ability to make good income, the freedom, the stimulation, all of those things are there, and they only happened because I did the work and because I had that purpose, that intent that I set out. About 20 years ago, when I wrote my first book, Bushy, because I wasn't an author before then. No. I was a commercial diver. I used to blow bubbles, basically. I was in sales and marketing for a few years for a Japanese company, and that's what really led me down this path. Yeah, right. But I wrote a book, but I'd never ever planned to be an author. It wasn't my lifelong fantasy to become a Thomas or Mark Twain type of thing. Not in a million years, But I wrote a book and it worked, and it was a simple book about marketing. And then I kind of started having people saying, "Well, could you come and talk at a conference for us?" Or, "Are you going to write another book?" and all that stuff. And then pretty soon on, I started to realize, wow, this is really cool. This is great. I get to travel. I get paid really good money to go and talk at conferences. People are writing to me and sending me letters and emails saying, wow, your book really changed my life. It really helped me. I'm getting all of those kind of means. And that's when I said, okay, I want to do this full time. Yeah. I want this to be my business. And that was when, and then I spent, all this time now really building this business. And it's interesting too, isn't it, mate? I think over time, just to get paid for a speaking job would have been, mind-blowing, So whereas now, I look at it and go, in the last, few years, just to present in somewhere like Iran, how would I have ever got to Iran, Amazing. In any other shape? But to go over there and spend 2 weeks, and presenting to 700 entrepreneurs in Iran, or to be doing like this last gig in England, for something like the European Union, for goodness sake. It's a pretty big organisation.
Massive, mate.
To say, hey, can you come and run 10 workshops around England for us? And you kind of go, I kind of pinch myself with this stuff.
I bet. I bet. No, I just it's awesome the way, and there's a common link that everything you do between writing the books, the small business stuff that really got you going, and then the guest speaking stuff you do. It's you're just an awesome storyteller. Andrew, as soon as you open your mouth, I just start to laugh, and not laugh at you, I'd laugh with you, because I just love the way you're able to break often quite complex subjects down into really relatable stories that go, yeah, I get that, and I'm on side with that, and the way you motivate too, mate. Having gone across the desert to write the Freedom Formula, and believe you me, I would never have finished that if it wasn't for your inspiration and the dig in the ribs along that journey. But it's been the best thing I've ever done, mate, for a whole bunch of reasons that I never really thought about when we started off. And I'm pretty keen to get your thoughts around this, because I found the self-reflection, I got to know myself a whole lot better during that writing process, and I came out of it being able to communicate my message a whole lot better. But it also gave me a sense of confidence that I didn't have before it, mate. And be just interested in your experiences around it, given you've written 20 odd books to date, I think. What's the writing experience for you, and sort of take us through your feelings and what you've gained on that process.
Yeah, sure, mate. I mean, for me, I think I always say to people that writing a book is the best personal development program you'll ever do. Without a doubt, you'll learn so much about yourself when you write a book. I've certainly learned a lot about myself in my writing, and I write about pretty simple stuff, business, predominantly. But I did learn a great deal, and I continue to learn as I write. I think it's one of those extraordinary things, and I write a lot these days, not just books. I've written probably 3,500, 4,000 articles, in the last 15 odd years. I mean, I have files bulging with articles and things like that. And I look at it and kind of go, you learn about yourself, and, we all battle with this kind of imposter syndrome and all that stuff. When you write a book, you gotta be prepared to just stop talking about a book and actually start writing one. And something weird happens when you write a book. People read it, and that's a scary thought for most of us, because we're going, oh my God, what are they going to say? Are they going to think, oh, this guy's an idiot, he's got no idea? Because we're all terrified of what other people are going to say about our work. And writing a book is an intimately personal kind of a thing where you're putting yourself out there. You literally are standing naked on the stage, if your book is any good anyway.
No, something that I've found really interesting about that, the very first page of my book is written backwards, and you've got to read from the bottom of the page back to front up to the top. And at the top of that page, if you've read so far, send me an email, because it'll let me know what sort of an investor you're going to be, because you're prepared to make a change and do things differently and stay the distance to get there. And the number of emails I've got already, mate, has just been, like you say, I thought, I'll write this book, but no one's going to read the damn thing. No one's got time to read these days. And
or deep down, we wish they won't read it because we're worried about what they say, right?
True. Yeah, don't tell anyone, mate. Yeah, that's right.
But strange things happen too, because we can read a book, we can write a book, and often they go into the ether. But when you start to get emails from people going, "Hey, look, I read your book," I remember one day I got an email from a 16-year-old boy in Singapore,
wow,
who just said to me, said, I'm going to. I want to be an entrepreneur, and I've read your book in the library at school, and I just want to thank you. It's really, you changed my life today. Now I know more than ever that I'm going to be an entrepreneur, and I'm going to learn from people like you, and just extraordinary, when you have that kind of stuff happening.
Yeah, incredible.
I had an email.
Sorry, mate.
Mate. On an email a while back last year, and there was the email is from I can't even remember the name of these people, and that was anyway. They said, "Oh, hi Andrew, you don't know us, but we've bought every single one of your books since you started writing, and we've followed you from your first book, 101 Ways to Market Your Business."
Awesome.
Today we're sitting in a resort in Bali. We literally just sold our business last week for $30 million.
Whoa.
And the reason we built our business, the reason it was successful and the reason it was worth $30 million was because of all the advice that you shared with us in your books. Yeah. And it was like, wow, you know,
Gold.
like you get something like that. But then, you know, there's the other thing that sometimes we don't realize. We look at it. I mean, my business books back then, are pretty much meat potatoes. You know, I was kind of talking pretty common sense kind of stuff. And to me, it was just stuff that I was realizing. I'm not preachy. I'm not a preachy kind of writer.
Yeah.
You know, I just kind of go, look, I did this and it works for me. Maybe it'll work for you. And, you know, and you never know what's going to happen with that stuff. You know, I got one Friday afternoon, Bush, I was in my office in Cairns where I live.
Yep.
And the phone rang and there was a lady just sobbing uncontrollably down the end of the phone. And, you know, and I did what all good men do. I started to apologize, you know, because clearly that's, you know, clearly I'm in big trouble here. But the default position was I'm trying to figure out who it is. And by this stage, I was actually getting kind of worried, you know, like this poor lady was really, really sobbing. Anyway, she finally calmed down enough to be able to kind of talk, and my heart was breaking for her. And she told me, you know, she told me a story. She said, look, I'm you know, this is who I am, and I bought a business with my husband. It's going really badly. He's lost the plot. He's drinking, and he's really violent towards me now. Our whole world is collapsing. The business is going to go broke. And this afternoon, I come home, told him I was sick. I've got my sister looking after the kids, and I'm going to kill myself.
Oh, good.
And it's, you know, 6 o'clock on a Friday night. And she said, and I just was getting ready. I had all the tablets and everything ready. And I just happened to see your book, you know, sitting next to the phone type thing. She said, I opened it up and I saw that you're in Cairns, and I live not that far from Cairns, and I just rang your office. Wow. 6 o'clock on a Friday, I happen to be in the office because I'm a workaholic, you know, at that time more than ever. And the phone rang and I happened to answer it. You know, normally I probably wouldn't have, you know, etc.
Yeah.
And I got this woman on the end of the line, and you know, all she needed was someone to talk to, and you know, we went on to become, which I did. She didn't commit suicide, thank goodness. She's an incredible woman, awesome. And she, you know, she's gone on and has a great life, and she's really successful and all the rest of it. But if anyone ever said to me, you know, you write a book about 101 ways to market your business, and one day that's going to happen, I would never have believed that for a heartbeat. So sometimes, you know, we think we write a book about something, but we don't necessarily know the impact that that's going to have on someone else. And the same can be said with our actions in life, Bushy. You know, there's a term called trophic cascade, and I love this concept. And it's really written about how they released a pack of wolves back in a Yellowstone National Park after they were all shot and made extinct. And within 10 years, these wolves, a small pack of, I don't know, 20 odd wolves, had literally changed the course of a river in the Yellowstone National Park. Wow. And the way they did that was because when they were all extinct, the elk could all wander down to the riverbanks and eat all of the vegetation on the side of the river because it was easy to get to. And over time, by eating all the vegetation, they created more erosion and the river changed its course. Within 10 years of these wolves being introduced back into Yellowstone, the wolves went straight to the river because it was easy to hunt the elk because they were out in the open. They hunted all the elk, and then all of the bushes started to grow back again, and the river started to change course back to where it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the point being that we have an impact on everything. Trophic cascade is that concept where we don't necessarily realize the impact we have on others. And I think this is for anyone who's listening. I hope I'm not going off on too much of a tangent here, mate.
No, it's all good.
But to me, this is an important part of who we are as humans, and we underestimate the impact that we have on others. Now, when you're in a position of authority and maybe a person of influence, or you know, someone like me, where you're standing in front of, you know, groups of people all the time, you know that, you know, it's kind of obvious, and it's a huge thing to be treated with respect that you have influence in front of an audience. But also, we've got to remember, though, that even in our day-to-day activities, we have huge impact on others. And just a very brief story I'd share here, mate. I used to have an office in Cairns Corporate Tower. So we had a high-rise. We have a high-rise in Cairns. I know, it's hard to believe,
or something,
right?
Is it?
It's 3 stories.
Three, of course.
So, no, it's actually, I think it's like 14 stories. Hard to believe. Anyway, wow. I had an office in the bottom of this place to run my little marketing company. And anyway, there was a coffee shop And I was at work at 6 o'clock in the morning, and this coffee shop opened at 6 o'clock. Not a coincidence, I might add, being coffee is my drug of choice these days.
Yeah, me too.
So I'd be clawing at the door at 6 o'clock, and there was this poor guy who worked in there called Michael, and he would just look up and see me with my big silly grin on my face and my coffee cup, and all the rest of it, and I'd hear him cringe. He'd open the door, and I would be so, how you doing, Michael? Another great day. What do you got planned today? And you could literally feel the hatred from him towards me. Whoa. He was bleary-eyed. He was grumpy. He was a young guy. He's younger than me, but it was pretty obvious that he didn't like me very much. But every day I went in there, and 6 o'clock in the morning, every single day, I'm clawing at the window, and I would just, he'd look up and you'd see him close his eyes and go, oh God, it's him, And anyway, I did notice over time, I wouldn't say he warmed to me, but he lessened. He got used to me. And I, you forget about that kind of stuff. You move on a little bit and all that kind of jazz. And it was a bit more normal. But anyway, one day, probably 6 months later, my receptionist at the time came in and she said, Michael from the coffee shop is here to see you. And I've gone, has he got a bag? Is he carrying a gun? Has he finally gone over the edge? Like, what's happening here? He just said he just wants 5 minutes of your time. And I went, okay. So he came in and I said, hi, Michael. And I said, is everything okay? And he said, look, I just want a couple of minutes of your time. He said, I don't know if you realise this, but when you first started coming to the coffee shop, I didn't like you very much.
No
and I went, really? I had a bit of an inkling, anyway. And he said, but I want to just tell you, when you were coming to that coffee shop, he said, I was in a really bad place. He said, I was stealing from the lady that owned the business. I had a drug problem. Wow. I was drinking. I was at university, failing everything. My relationship was terrible. Everything in my life was terrible. And I was really kind of trying to find a reason to keep going. And he said, and every day you came in with that big smile and you would ask me questions about the day. You'd ask me questions about me that I didn't want to answer, and I hated you for it. And he said, but something started to happen that after you would leave and I hated you because I just hated you, other people would walk in and I'd be looking at someone across from me and they look miserable and forlorn, and then I would say to them, hey, how you going? What have you got planned for today? And I started to do what you did to me. And I noticed then how differently I started to feel and the impact that I had on others. And he said, so 6 months down the line, I'm off the drugs, stopped drinking. I admitted to the lady that owned the business that I'd been stealing money. She didn't dob me into the police, and I'm paying her back. Wow. My university grades there, my relationship has never been better. And I just, he said, I don't know if you realise the impact you had on me and my life. And I just wanted to say thank you. And I kind of went, to be honest, for me, it really became a bit of a challenge. Really? I looked at this guy. Well, there's no way I was going to freaking let this guy be miserable all the time. So in that first, kind of 6 month period, it was a mission. I'm going to make him smile. I'm going to get a laugh out of him if it kills me. You know what I mean? Because I'm naturally like that all the time. But I didn't realise the impact that it had on him. And ever since that time, you know what? I've been so careful and so considered and so thoughtful as much as I can be in every interaction I have with another human being, because I think it is so easy to be really hurtful. It is so easy to not be encouraging and positive when it's so easy to actually be positive and encouraging. All those kind of things. And I think that people often compliment me on my personality, and I go, well, it's far better than the alternative. For me, everyone I meet, I want to make every interaction I have with another human being special in some way.
Awesome.
That's whether it be a taxi driver, an Uber driver, my flight attendant, a guy selling me coffee. Yeah. I don't care, and I think it's really easy to kind of do that. But we don't. We kind of, I don't know. We're in our own little worlds these days. I could tell you 1,000 of those stories, Bushy.
Oh, that's awesome, mate. And it comes across, mate. You're a master of empathy and kindness, mate. You actually care, and that's what actually comes across. It's the genuine care that you have for other people is what makes you you, and why so many people like you, follow you, and admire you, mate. It's and the crazy thing is, being kind and caring is actually free. It costs you nothing to do that. Just a little bit of time and a smile on your face. And you've met my good wife Sonia. She's very similar to you in that she's just always caring and thinking about what other people's needs are, and she just does stuff. Doesn't expect to get anything back. She just goes and helps a complete stranger for no reason whatsoever. And when you ask her, she'll say, "Well, it's actually quite selfish because I get a lot of joy myself out of doing that." And clearly, you've cottoned onto that early, mate, because people use the excuse of time and we're busy and all the rest of it, but doesn't cost anything or take any more time to smile and try and make someone else's day brighter. And you've got that down to a fine art.
I think too, it's a bit of bravery. I think we're almost a bit awkward in situations that we don't want to reach out, or we don't. I don't know. That's what I look at it as. That you got to be brave and reconnect. Like, I'm one of those people. You get in an elevator going down, I'm going to say hello.
Yeah, awesome.
Like I'm going to say, "G'day, how you going?" Like, okay, some people move away from you in the elevator, and I'm okay with that. But I had this. But it takes courage to do that. But the reality is exactly as the lovely Sonia says. I feel selfish as well with it, because I tell you what, I get far more out of those moments than anything else. And it takes the courage to look someone in the eye and smile. Yes. And we're not very good at that anymore. We've lost a little bit of that ability. I was in David Jones a little while ago, Bushy, and it was 5 o'clock. They were getting towards closing, and I'd just gone and bought something unbelievably riveting, like a pair of socks. And there's actually some underwear. I'd gone on a speaking job and I'd forgotten to pack underwear. And
you're not a free baller then, mate, clearly.
I'm a bit too old to go free and easy these days. It's like it's too risky at my age.
Not doing the Kramer thing, no.
Oh, my God. And I walked up to the counter. There wasn't a whole lot of people around, and there was a little Indian lady behind the cash register. And I'd never seen someone who looked so sad in their life.
Wow.
Oh, my God. I just looked at her and she just oozed sadness, this incredible sadness. I could palpably feel it. Wow. And I just looked at her and I said, "Are you okay?" And she just burst into tears and she said, "No, I'm not." And I just walked behind the counter and I gave her this big giant hug, and I didn't ask her what was wrong. She didn't tell me what was wrong. That didn't need to be said. You know what I mean? Like whatever was going on in her world, that did not need to be said. I wasn't there to be a therapist for her, but she just needed another human being to say, "Are you okay?" And I gave this big giant hug, paid for my underwear, and left. And she just, she said, I'm having just a really, really a hard day today, and you're the first person that's even noticed.
Awesome.
And you don't know what that means to me. And I didn't do that I didn't need accolades. I didn't need no reason. It was just, that ability to reach out to another human being. And I think, again, I don't know, I think we're losing the ability to do that, to be brutally honest, Bushy.
I agree, mate. I often say that I find that people are either investors or outvestors. And some are a bit of both, but an investor is generally investing in themselves. An outvestor is investing to help others. And, mate, you're an absolute outvestor. I couldn't name anyone who outvests better than you do in terms of just your ability to touch people's lives and make them smile and make them feel better, and also help them along that journey too, mate. So
totally selfishly though, because I do exactly like Sonia. I get so much out of it. You got no idea how that changes my life, and and when you do it, it's just, I don't know. It's such a beautiful experience.
Yeah.
That's the wonderful irony about it, is that, people, there's so many opportunities to have a better life if you just, are brave enough to help others have a better life. And I know that can sound like literally you've just walked into the Hallmark supermarket of cards, but it is so powerfully true in so many different ways. Every part of my life, that has got better has happened as a result of me having clear intent about who I am, what I'm doing, my actions right here, right now, from driving down the road to, to literally, I don't know, just there's so many examples of it on a day-to-day basis, mate, not even just on a, some people think this sounds like a one-off thing. I have the most incredible experiences with people, animals, things like that, simply on a day-to-day basis just because of that kind of desire to want to help them, I think, more than anything else. Yeah. Or just, it's become so important for me in my little world. That I'm grateful that I was lucky enough to figure that out, while I was, still around.
Well, mate, you share our love of the voiceless and innocent, and your affinity with animals and what you're doing in that regard. Same thing. People say to us, you're awesome for taking on for rescue dogs.
And you are. Oh, my God.
Yeah, but it doesn't feel that way, mate. It's like you say, no. It's that's not what we get an enormous joy out of doing that. And if there's one thing that really angers Sonia and I, it's people who abuse the voiceless and the innocent, because they have no choice, mate. And if we can help some of those out just by taking care of them, then it's a very, very small contribution. But and I see, again, with your very generous, caring outlook, mate, doing the same thing with you work with the RSPCA and everything you do there. And there's just I think we're so time poor now, mate. I'd be interested in your thoughts on this, but when we have no time, that creates its own stress, which means we get more selfish. And we don't take the time or slow down enough to be kind and think about what other people's needs are. What are your thoughts around that, mate?
Oh, completely. I think that it has to be a conscious thing that we do, and that's why I wrote the book. The Me Myth was exactly around that. Was this whole view that everyone's searching for answers to be happier, to be wealthier, to have better experiences, all this kind of stuff. For my personal philosophy on that is that you achieve that. It's so easy to achieve. But, it doesn't happen when you're self-obsessing internally, and it's, it really is a conscious decision to say, that I want to make every interaction I have with another human being have meaning. Doesn't mean they're all going to be perfect. Believe me, I'm not, living in Disneyland, but the intent that you set out with it is what will have an impact. When when I go to a shopping centre and going through a checkout, I'm going to get that person to look me in the eye no matter what they're doing. I'm going to smile, and I'm going to get them to smile. I'm going to get them to interact, and I'm going to, that might be selfish of me because I'm trying to make them have a better experience, and maybe that defeats the whole purpose. But it's almost like you want to wake people up. Look at it. We're putting traffic lights in footpaths in Sydney and Melbourne so that people don't have to look up from their phones.
I haven't heard that. Is that true?
It's true. I've seen them. I actually thought I saw them in Adelaide.
You're kidding, Mo. You can see how often I go into the city then, because that's a scary concept, isn't it?
Little lights. I think evolution should play a role here. Don't put lights in there to encourage people to do it. You know what I mean? Like, it's just one of the most bizarre things. So you know what it's like. We all see it. You go to a restaurant and there's, a couple out on their phones.
I know.
Talking, and this is, again, all stuff that we are all very familiar with, but it's such a lovely thing to be able to just smile and have a chat to someone, and it's a rarity these days, not a normal thing. Like I get in an Uber, I'm going to have a chat to the person who's driving, and I've learnt amazing things about countries, about people, simply because I'm interested in other people, and I think there's a really I think that a part of it is if you nurture your spirit of curiosity, so much can kind of happen in your life as well. And they're all kind of tied in together, but it's easy to not have any interaction or engagement with someone, I don't know whether it's because I'm from a regional part of Australia as well, but, like you walk down the street, you say good day to someone.
Yeah.
You do that. I do that in the city.
Yeah,
people walk away from me.
Yeah, same. They look at you like you've got some sort of disease. We do the same. In fact, we make a bit of a joke out of it now just to see what sort of reaction we're going to get, because you get some pretty interesting responses or no response. But it's fun. It's such a simple thing to do. Yet, as you say, I don't know whether we're driven by fear or whatever it is, or we're so absorbed in what we're doing that we just not interested in what's happening outside of our own little globe. But
probably a bit of both. It's a bit of fear. It's a bit of it's a bit of awkwardness. People. And just a lost skill. More than anything else. Or a declining skill. Like to be able to just kind of sit down and talk and chat and do that kind of stuff. But again, though, this does come back to empathy. It only works if you're actually interested in other people.
True.
And, in any kind of business role, for me as a speaker, one of the things that I do, mate, and this again, probably it will sound a bit hippy-dippy to some people, but before I go on stage, I find a quiet space and I just draw on the universe or God or whoever you want to, whoever your deity is. I'm not particularly religious, but I do draw on, I draw on the universe and say, please help me to help the people in the room today that need some direction, guidance, help, support, whatever it might be. And I make that my intent when I go on stage is not to try and make myself look clever as a speaker. It's not to make me be the funniest guy in the room. My intent is to help the people in the room today and come from that position of supporting and encouraging, and I took me a while to learn that, because in my early days, it was all about my ego, I had to go on stage and look smart, because I had an inferiority complex about, I don't really know, I haven't got any qualifications, who the hell am I to talk about this stuff? Yeah. So I had to go on stage and look clever. Now I realise that's impossible. So I basically go on stage and I'm driven by a desire to help others, awesome. to share my experiences, and hopefully that will translate into a way that will help them. And again, it's interesting what's changed in my life since I adopted that approach. So much has changed in my life, that from a speaking point of view, writing point of view, whatever way you want to look at it, you come from the right place, act with the right intent, your entire life changes, and it certainly has for me.
Yeah, that's awesome, mate. I mean, they put public speaking up there with the same stress levels of death and divorce, I think, mate, and seeing where you've come from to your natural ability on stage. And you're one of the few people left, mate, that Australians have lost the ability to take the piss out of ourselves, I think. Yeah. We get way too serious about stuff that doesn't matter anymore, and the person I get the most laughs out of is taking the piss out of myself.
And, absolutely.
And absolutely. I see you doing the same, and people really connect with that. And it's like, okay, this guy's not taking himself too seriously. But I love what he's saying, and it breaks down that whole tall poppy thing. And it's a real skill, mate. I haven't come across too many who've overcome that ego thing that you talk about, because most people are up there to try and prove how clever and how smart they are, and I certainly suffer from that all the time, mate. No question about it. But if you adopt what you're saying there, is just, okay, I'm out here to, how can I help these people take something away today that's going to improve their lives? And it probably makes it a fair bit simpler from that perspective, I'm guessing.
I think it does, and I think in the day-to-day side of things as well, like when we're even when we're working, or if you're selling stuff, or if you're doing that kind of stuff, if you take a moment and put yourself in the shoes of the people sitting across the desk from you, or at the other end of the email, or wherever they may be, if you come from the right place, and sometimes the right place is very much to say, well, you shouldn't buy what it is that I'm selling, because it's not going to be right for you. Or, if you're really, if you're trying to help someone and the money kind of happens afterwards, well, 9 times out of 10, it's a clean sale. It's a better sale in that place, because you're coming from the right place of intent. The stuff that you talk about all the time, Bushy, and I think, again, that's a part of this. And I guess hopefully, people listening to what we're talking about today as well, I'm not sure if we're on topic for the theme of your
awesome,
podcast. But I look at it and kind of go, if we can be better as human beings, and I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with anyone, but for me personally, I know I can be better. And I know that every single day I've got to somehow work at being better today than I was yesterday.
Yeah.
You know, and that means, was I better at communicating? Was I more considerate? Was I more empathetic, or was I actually not today? You know, and just trying to say, well, what parts of my life is this coming into? You know, am I tired and cranky and just, you know, lashing out because I'm tired and cranky? You know, am I letting someone kind of impact on me because I don't have the strength to just ignore what they're saying? You know, I've certainly learned, you know, it's a really interesting one. You know, since my profile's grown, I've got my share of haters. You know what I mean?
Okay.
The tall poppy, you know, syndrome, whatever you want to have, people have said horrible things about me. And you go, wow, really? Okay. And, you know, it's devastating at first, but after a while you just kind of go, really? A, it's always anonymous. B, who the hell are these people? They just sad and sorry people on the end of a bottle of wine, end of a keyboard, and it's late at night, and they just basically feel the need to say horrendous people about. And if you fight back, they'll keep rattling on. Otherwise, they'll get bored, and then they'll move on and find someone else to hate on. And I think that we start to, you know, hopefully again we get a bit older, a bit wiser, and we learn how to manage ourselves a little bit better as we go through life. You know, and I think, you know, every day, you know, things start to count a little bit more. We start to realise what's important. And I think that we often realise how much more control we have on so many things. In a world where we feel that we have little control, I think we have far more control, and the most powerful control we have is on ourselves, how we manage ourselves, how we interpret things to mean, what we make things mean, all of that kind of stuff. Yet we surrender that, you know, and kind of go, oh, it's out of my hands. Is it really?
No.
You know, most of the time it's not. No. You know, I'm broke. You know, it's out of my hands. Is it really? You know, my relationship with my partner is terrible, you know. But what can I do about it? You know, well, you know, if it's really out of your hands, then, well, you can't do anything, can you? You know, but is it really? You know, we got to ask ourselves harder questions, tougher questions.
Totally
you know,
right.
so.
Yeah, that's awesome, mate. But I'm going to pivot a little bit here around the sort of investment exercise, and because I guess over the 35 odd years that I've been working and talking to people and doing a massive amount of reading, I'm a read freak. A lot of Australians tend to invest in their work, their career, or their business, and they focus on the income. But those that I've seen achieve, you know, real freedom, also invest in growth assets that replace their active work through more passive means. Your books are obviously a passive income stream. What other growth assets do you or will you invest in moving forward, mate? Yeah,
sure. I mean, you know, for me, a lot of it is intellectual property, you know, in my business side of things, without a doubt, you know, like the stuff that has a lot of value. So as an entrepreneur, that for me, there's a lot of value to be had in creating intellectual property that others can buy. And, you know, I've been quite successful in that space, you know, creating, you know, programs and that others can then sell, others can buy a few, which is interesting because I can kind of keep creating those.
Right.
You know, shares for me, you know, is certainly an area, and I kind of, you know, invest in longer term shares, you know, bought them, put them away, and all that kind of stuff. And over the years, off and on, property, but I don't necessarily kind of become a bit of a slave to the property as well. You know, like in Cairns, there's always a saying here, you know, that when the locals start buying property, you know, that means the market's about to turn down. You know what I mean? Like the market's about to bottom out. Or get worse. So you know, I mean, over the years, I've dabbled a bit in investment properties here and there, and all the rest of it. But realistically, most of my revenue now, particularly where I'm at in my career now, a lot of it does come from being high income earning now. You know, so there's a lot of revenue comes in terms of the work that I do because of my reputation, all the rest of it. So you know, so I'm just kind of, you know, building it up, cash, shares, bit of property here and there, intellectual property stuff, and, you know, kind of preparing across a range of different things, I guess, is the easiest way for me to describe that, Bushy.
Yeah, no, it's spot on. Awesome, mate. And I'm going to do a quick, what I call the ambush or the bushfire lightning round now, mate, and just hit you with a couple of quickies. Your favourite quote, mate, and why?
Well, it's one that I'm kind of using a lot at the moment by Alvin Toffler, and the quote there is, The illiterate of the 21st century won't be those who can't read or write, but those who can't learn, unlearn, and then relearn. And that to me just sums up what life and business is like at the moment.
Yeah.
You know, everything's changing at such a dramatic rate that if we're not, you know, really learning, unlearning, and relearning in a hurry, then we're not going to survive. You know, and that to me is such a powerful quote and so relevant for all of us at the moment that I just every time I use it a lot when I'm presenting, and every time I say it, it's almost like I'm really saying it to myself. You know, more than even to the audience.
Yeah, it's a cracker. That is, that's spot on, mate. I heard that once in the distant past, but it's becoming truer, isn't it? The amount of change is so dynamic and so rapid now that if we're not open to looking at new ways to do things, we're going to be left behind. So, no, that's a cracker. What about apart from your own books, obviously, and there's 20 of those to choose from, what's the top book that you would recommend people read and why again, mate?
Okay, so there's so many good books. You know,
you've got a library of them, haven't you?
Such a hard question, isn't that one? You know, there's a book that I read every year, and on Christmas morning, and it's an old classic. It's Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, and it's one of the reasons why I'm so good at interacting with people. It's one of the reasons why I am a great communicator in so many ways. It's because that book. And even though it was written in 1936 or 1939 or something ridiculous, to me, when I read it, you know, and I've read it probably 35 times or something ridiculous now, it is still the most powerful book that I've read. And you know, if you know how to deal with people, then I tell you what, you know, there's so many opportunities. If you know how to communicate, if you know how to engage, if you know how to do all of that kind of stuff, you know, life will be a whole lot easier.
Yeah, totally agree, mate. I read that book many years ago when I was up in Alice Springs and in an architectural practice, and it actually that was another light bulb moment for me because it taught me the value of relationships, and that doesn't matter what business you're in, it's all about relationships at the end of the day. And if you spend more time caring about others and doing that, then you'll get looked after long term. It's an absolute cracker. What's the best piece? Sorry, mate.
Sorry, buddy. I've just got to say, you worked in Port Moresby as an architect and Alice Springs as an architect. Were you specialising in the hardest places on the face of the planet to work in? Like, were you in, like, you know, in downtown Baghdad or something as well? Was that one of your gigs?
I was in Bangkok, but that's another story. And I did a lot of work on the Aboriginal communities too, mate. You'd think I might have been running away from something, but I'm not going to tell you what that is, Andrew. But probably myself, actually, at the end of the day. But what's the best piece of investment advice that you've ever received, mate? And I'm not just talking about investing in physical things. I'm talking about your time, energy, money, skills.
Yeah.
What would that be?
I think the best bit of advice that I've had in that space has been to invest in things that you understand.
Yeah.
And you know, like, and again, whether that be, you know, personal development, whether that be, you know, property shares, doesn't really matter. You know, the times that I lose money is when I invest in stuff that I don't understand.
Yeah, no, good call.
You know, that all the time, or when I lose time, or whatever it might be. You know what I mean? It's that, and so I'm slow to invest, you know, my time, my energy, you know, and I'm hopefully a little bit wiser now too about how I do that from a financial point of view. But I invest in what I know. It's like, you know, I remember buying shares in companies I didn't really understand what they did or how they made money, blah, blah, blah. But someone said, here's a tip, my advisor. So I'd go and buy shares. I didn't really understand the company, never made money. But when I knew the company, when I did my research, did my homework, understood what it was they made, and I stopped and thought about it, they were always the shares that I made money on. You know, and it was like, you got to, and I think Warren Buffett mentioned something like that as well. You know, just buy, you know, invest in what you know about.
Yeah, no, it's spot on. And the complete change of subject here, but this is a hobby horse of mine because I think Aussies pay way too much tax, mate. What's the top thing you've done to pay less tax?
What's the top thing that I've done to pay less tax? Well, I've certainly had plenty of years where I haven't made any money. You know, I've certainly had plenty of years where I've been able to carry a great loss across. That's been awesome. You know, and in a funny way, you kind of get resentful when you start making money again and you got to start paying. It's like, really? I'm going to pay tax this year. How much? You've got to be joking. Oh my God. For me, I think what I've always done is had a really, really good working relationship with my accountant. Had the same accountant for many, many years now. And I'm quite demanding of my accountant. Yep. And it's like, again, I'm not a, just call me once a year and give me some ideas and thoughts on that. I'm really active. I want to be involved and engaged, and I want to do my tax minimalisation in February. Yes. You know what I mean? So 3 or 4 months before the end of the year. Yeah. And that's been really good for me just in terms of it's taught me to plan better, and it's taught me to give me enough notice to be able to do my tax better. And saved me a lot of money over the years, I've got to say, So that's it's probably a bit of a boring answer, but that's what works for me.
That's being strategic. That's getting ahead of the game. That's a few months before you have to write a tax return, get some advice on, well, based on where I'm at, what should I be doing to optimise the amount I'm going to leave in my pocket? Well, there aren't a lot that do that, mate. They get to June 30 and then work out how they're going to do it. It's a bit late by then. So that's awesome advice, mate. If I just look back on our conversation today, mate, to sum it up, what do you believe you really invest in, Andrew?
That's a really interesting question, Bushy. I think what I've invested in, two things. I think I've invested in myself a great deal. I've spent a lot of time, a lot of money, read a lot of books, gone to a lot of programs around the world. I commit to mastering my craft, whether it be writing books or being a presenter. I invest in myself financially, time-wise, external skills, all that kind of stuff, without a doubt. That's, I think that's where I invest, and it's my greatest investment in that. Yeah. And the other one is investing in other people. As I say, not looking at the time that I would spend with others as a drain or an inconvenience or any of that kind of stuff. I look at it the exact opposite of that. Invest in relationships and invest in people, and even that, the conversation with an Uber driver for 20 minutes to me is an investment, an investment for both of us.
Yeah, if I was to use the one word that I think sums you up, mate, it's empathy. And, you've got got this amazing ability to care and really want to help others. And it's that clearly a reason why you're so loved by everyone that has an opportunity to spend some time with you, mate. And
thank you.
Yeah, bloody awesome, mate. And but mate, sort of drawing it to a close, then what's the future hold, mate? What are you investing in now that you can share with us that people are going to get excited about?
Well, again, for me, it's I'm reinvesting back in my business now. That's a big part of what I'm doing. Yeah. So a bit of a change. I'm going to spend more time developing, new products and new programs. Probably do more stuff internationally. So that is a bit of a shift in my business. So I've got to invest in myself. Yeah. That means time, fitness. It's hard work doing this international travel, and staying healthy and all that kind of jazz. So I'm investing a lot in my health and well-being, at the moment, and that's a really great investment that I probably haven't invested as much in over the years. Yeah. But I've got a lovely lady in my world who's very much driven to keep me around for a little bit longer on the face of the planet. So, so that's probably, if I was going to say, what my biggest investment is actually that.
Awesome, mate. No, that's sensational. And, mate, if those that are interested in getting some assistance with small business advice, or wanting to look to write that book that they've always had in them but haven't been brave enough to do it, or are wanting to tackle that logo that stops them from getting on stage and speaking to others, how can they get in touch with you, mate?
Just andrewgriffiths.com.au. Really easy. Or do a Google search, you'll find me. I'm pretty easy to find these days, mate.
Easy, mate. Look, Andrew, very appreciative of your time. I know how busy you are, and how many people put massive demands on you and your time. Again, I'll say you're one of the few people that really has changed my life, mate, and I'll forever be indebted to you for that, mate.
Thank you. That's a really nice thing to say, mate. Thank you.
I mean that with all genuineness, mate. Very few people have had that amount of influence and been such great blokes as a consequence of, mate. I love your humility. I love your sense of humour. I know everyone's going to really enjoy listening to this, mate, and very keen to stay in touch and follow your trajectory, and hopefully at some stage to do something with you, mate. So
yeah, absolutely, Bushy. I'm going to come down and stay with you or Sonia and get to meet those four-legged fur balls of yours.
They'll love you, mate. That's waiting, and there's some great wineries in our area, mate. So you're going to love the homestead at Clarendon. Can't wait to see you there, mate.
Good on you. Thank you very much, mate. I really appreciate your time. And thank you, Bushy.
Awesome, mate. All right, we'll leave it there, mate. We'll keep in touch, and I look forward to talking to you soon, mate.
Thanks, mate. Take care.
How good was that? I hope you enjoyed it. To get a summary of all the investment gold and to get a copy of the show notes, email me on hello@khgroup.com.au. That's HELLO@khgroup.com.au. Or check us out at www.khgroup.com.au/get invested. And join me next week for another episode of the Get Invested podcast. Thanks for listening, and as always, dream as if you'll live forever and live as if you'll die tomorrow.